Hey, it's good to have you guys here this morning. Has anybody started embracing fall with like some pumpkin coffee or pumpkin donuts or candles? Hey, that was awesome. That is awesome. We started Next Steps this morning during our 9 o'clock service, and anytime we do that, I get donuts for them. But in the fall, in October, they get pumpkin donuts. And so it's the best. I ate 1 or 3 of them this morning to make sure they were good, and they are amazing. So I get psyched up this time of year, and I usually try to hold on to summer as long as possible. When there's pumpkin donuts involved, I'm all on board with fall. If we haven't met before, my name is Cotter, and I'm one of the pastors here. And hey, if you find yourself stuck in a corn maze on a Sunday this fall, you can still be a part of Bay Shore, because we have Facebook and YouTube and the podcast. And every Sunday we got people that are joining us all over the world. If anybody is in a pod or in a corn maze this morning, we're thinking about you, and thank you for joining us. Can we make some noise for everybody joining us online this morning? Well, I saw a sign the other day while I was driving that said that Christmas is less than 90 days away. Isn't that crazy? People were cheering in the first service, and that's kind of my thought is there's a lot of things to do between now and Christmas. This is not an invitation for you to pull out your phone and start buying things on Amazon. But it's crazy. Christmas is like right around the corner. And so the other night, like I'm a planner, and so when I realized that, my wife Emily and I, we were like, we need to figure out what we are buying for these kids because I have no idea. And so we started kind of planning out like what we're going to do for them, and she seemed like she had it under control. So after about 5 minutes, I got distracted, and I started looking up things for myself. So I was watching videos of the new Call of Duty game. I was Googling 8K TVs and surfboards, and I got just totally distracted. But after a few minutes, I had a really great list of all the things I wanted other people to buy me. And I thought, you know what? Like, why don't we just fast forward through fall? I can deal without pumpkin donuts. Let's just get to Christmas. Christmas can be tomorrow. Let's put out some cookies for Santa, go to bed, wake up. It can be Christmas morning, and I can just play Call of Duty on my giant TV. That sounds kind of awesome. But man, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. Isn't it true that sometimes we get so focused on things that are coming in the future that we miss out on what's happening right now? We start thinking about what life will be like when the kids move out, or when we get to retirement, or when we get through a busy time at work, and we miss out on all of the cool things that are happening in our lives right now. And we've been in this series called Where's the Party? And I believe it's so easy to miss out on the party that is happening in our lives right now. Whether we are frustrated with our situation in life, or if we are too focused on things that are coming in the future, it's so easy for us to miss out on the good things that are happening around us. When we are stressed out at work, we forget how thankful we should be that we even have a job. When our kids aren't sleeping at night, it's hard to or easy to forget how nice it is to hold them and to sing to them. And there's so many things in life that take our focus off of right now, both good and bad. And so last year for Christmas, my family got to go down to Florida. We got to go down there with some family, and my son Taj and I were looking at some of the pictures from that trip a few days ago. We've got one of those that we can put up on the screen. So that's our son. He was so pumped. This is from a day that we got to go to Magic Kingdom, and so he and I were looking at this photo the other day. And have you ever looked at a photo and like you remember exactly what you were thinking in that moment? So I was looking back at this photo, and I remember exactly what I was thinking right now. I was very stressed out when I took this photo because it's Florida, and it looks great. It was like 35 degrees that day, and the sun was going down, and so I was thinking in that moment, like, do I have enough warm clothes for my son? Like, are we all going to freeze out here? And the day was getting it was like towards the end of the day, we had dinner reservations we had to go all the way across the park for. And I was worrying about whether or not we were going to be able to get across the park for that. And our son was sick at this time. And I was like, man, we're in Florida. Like, I'm stressed out. He's not feeling good. Like, we got to make sure we get him back home on time or back to the hotel. And I don't want to miss the bus to get him back to the hotel. I want to make sure he sleeps. And man, I had so many things that were going on in my head at that moment. But the other day when I looked at this photo, I didn't remember any of that at first. The first thing I noticed was just how incredible this moment was. Like, we were in Florida. We were in Disney World. My son got to meet Mickey Mouse and Tigger and Darth Vader, and he got to watch the sunset with the castle behind him and do all this incredible stuff. But when I was actually like in that moment, I was so distracted by all of these other little things. And I wish that I had just been a little bit more present in that moment. I wish that I had been less distracted by all the things that I needed to get accomplished and the different stressors, and just more focused on being present and embracing that moment where I was at. And so today we're talking about being content. And this may not be something that you struggle with. This is definitely something that I struggle with. So I'm excited about this message today. We're going to open our Bibles to the New Testament this morning. And if you're new to church or new to the Bible's got two major sections. It's got the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so the Old Testament kind of follows from the beginning of time up through a few years before Jesus was born. And then the New Testament picks up just right before Jesus was born and kind of follows him through his life, and then follows the early church after Jesus' life. And so today we're going to be in the New Testament. We're going to be in the book of Philippians. And Philippians is a book that a man named Paul wrote. Now, Paul, we know him. If you have heard of Paul, we know Paul as a missionary. He didn't start out his life as a missionary. He actually started out his life as somebody who hated Christianity. But then he experienced Jesus, and his entire life was changed. From that moment on, he dedicated his life to telling everyone he could about Jesus. He started a ton of churches, and so this book called Philippians is actually a letter that he wrote to one of the churches that he started in a city called Philippi. And when he wrote this book, he was a prisoner. He was in prison in Rome, and so that situation, what was happening in his life at that time, it's kind of amazing considering what we're about to read. So we're going to hop in here to chapter 4 of Philippians in verse 11. If you need a Bible, we've got free Bibles just for you. They're out in the lobby on the same table as the coffee. They're there for you. So please grab one if you need one. So we'll put this on the screen, Philippians 4, starting in verse 11. He says, "I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." So Paul's in jail, like one of the least enviable positions someone could possibly be in, but here he is saying that he has learned to be content in whatever situation he is in. Whether things are going well or if he's struggling, he's learned to be content at all times. Now to be content is to be satisfied. Is to be thankful and fulfilled with life in the present moment. And what Paul is saying here is that he's found a way to be satisfied, to be fulfilled, no matter what his circumstances are in life. Now, how many of you guys know that there are not a lot of times in life where things are totally perfect? There are just not a lot of times like that, right? Like there's not a lot of times where everyone we know is healthy. There's not a lot of times where all of our relationships are in a good spot, where our finances are all in a good spot, where every task is complete, every dish is washed, every kid's toy is picked up, every meal is prepped, and the oil is changed in all the cars. Like, that doesn't happen very often. So being content, it's not about having a perfect life or being in a perfect situation. Contentment, and we'll put this on the screen, it's being fulfilled and thankful even though things aren't perfect. Being content is about being fulfilled and thankful even though things aren't perfect. There's always going to be some good going on and usually some bad as well. We could always have a bigger house, a better car, a trendier pair of shoes, but being content is about being satisfied even when life isn't perfect. And that's why Paul could write about contentment from prison. That's why he could say, whether I have nothing or everything, I can be fully satisfied and fulfilled. Now let's look at these verses again, and we're going to read one verse further this time. So we'll start in verse 11. He says, "I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength." Paul says he can be content in any situation because of Jesus. Because of Jesus. Now this last verse, that's Philippians 4:13, and that's what I like to call a bumper sticker verse, okay? It's the kind of verse that you're driving around on the road and you just see it on a bumper sticker. You see verses like this just kind of in all kinds of places and used to mean things that the author really had no intention of them meaning. And you just kind of see this verse everywhere. Now, when I was growing up, we were a big-time sports family. Like every night, our family was watching some kind of sport on TV. Football, baseball, basketball, golf, if you could believe it, bowling, anything you could think of. We watched the hot dog eating contest in the summer. Literally anything. Now in the winter, almost every night there was college basketball on. So we were always watching college basketball. We were big fans of Duke. Big Duke fans. My dad grew up a Duke fan. My aunt went there and played some sports there, and so we were always a big fan of them. Now, in the early 2000s, the best player at Duke was this guy named J.J. Redick. We got a picture of him we can put up on the screen. That's J.J. Redick. This guy was incredible. Like one of the best college basketball players of all time. He could score from anywhere on the court, and his best strength, the best thing he did was shooting free throws. Now, if you're like my wife and you don't care about sports, know what a basketball is or what a free throw is, a free throw is like when somebody fouls you and you're standing at this line and everybody is standing around staring at you while you shoot. Nobody can block your shot. You just get to take your time, do whatever you want, and then shoot. And so J.J. Redick, he's one of the top free throw shooters of all time in the history of college basketball. And he had this routine that he did every single time. He did it the exact same way every time he stepped up to the line. So he'd get the ball and he'd stand up there and he would say, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And then he would shoot, and 91% of the time he would make his shot. Now, I wasn't there in the prison cell with the Apostle Paul, but I'm willing to bet he was not talking about shooting a basketball when he was talking about this verse. And he wasn't. He was talking about contentment. Paul says, I have learned to be content in all situations. And then he says, I can do this because Jesus gives me the strength to. So we can be content in any situation because of Jesus. We can be satisfied. We can be fulfilled. We can be at peace in any situation because of Jesus. Now, how could Paul do that? How can we do that? How is it possible to look past our circumstances and say that we are fulfilled, that we're at peace, even when things aren't going well? How can we be happy and present in this moment right now in the time of life that we're in? Well, for Paul, it was a little simple. So for Paul, at one point in his life, he lived as an enemy of Jesus. He would hunt down Jesus followers, round them up, and put them into prison. That's what his life was all about. He was about as anti-Jesus as somebody could get. So he knew what it was like to live without Jesus, to be empty, to lack fulfillment, to lack purpose and hope. He lived the no Jesus life, and he knew how unsatisfying that was. And then his life was changed. His life was changed. He encountered Jesus. He experienced peace. He learned that Jesus gave up his life for him. He learned about the eternity in heaven that awaits everyone who follows Jesus. And from that moment on, Paul knew that Jesus loved him, and he knew that an eternity of peace and joy awaited him when his days on this earth were over. So he could be in prison and still be content because he was focused on that bigger picture. He knew that no situation could overshadow the love that Jesus had for him. He knew that nothing he could look forward to would be greater than the eternity in heaven that he was looking forward to. So he could be content and he could be present in all moments, because what's better than knowing that Jesus loves you? What is better than knowing that Jesus has an eternity of peace and joy waiting us after this life? Look at what Paul says in the book of Romans. We'll put this on the screen. This is Romans 8, verse 18. He says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us." The sufferings we experience, the pain, the trials, the difficulties, all those things are very real. When you experience the loss of someone you love, when you experience hardships in your health and your finances, those are very real struggles. The prison cell that Paul was in when he was writing this, that was very real. The execution that Paul experienced because he was a Jesus follower at the end of his life, that was very real. What Paul is saying is not diminishing the reality of the struggles that we face. He's trying to help us put them into perspective, trying to help us look at them through the right lens. Paul tells us that anything that we experience in this life, it can't compare to the eternity that we're going to experience in heaven. That joy, that hope, that excitement for eternity, that's what awaits everyone who follows Jesus. So when Paul said in Philippians that he has learned to be content, this is what he means. We can enjoy where we're at in life right now because we know what's coming in our future. Life doesn't have to be perfect today because There's a day in the future where everything will be perfect. And we shouldn't rush away all of our days right now in anticipation of some event that's coming in a week or a month or a year, because God has placed all of us right here in this moment only one time. We only get to experience today one time. We only get to experience this moment one time, and being content is how we make the most of that. Now, I want us to check out a story from the Old Testament. And what we're about to read is following a group of people known as the Israelites. So the Israelites were God's chosen people, and they lived for many years in Egypt as slaves. And their slavery was really rough. They were doing hard labor. It was a bad situation all around for them. And so God wanted to rescue them. So he sent this man named Moses and his brother Aaron there to rescue them. And so after some time, God miraculously freed them. And that's where we're kind of picking up in the story. They've been freed. They are out in the desert. So we'll toss this up on the screen. This is from Exodus chapter 16, starting in verse 1. So it says, "The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt." Is anybody confused? A lot of weird words in there that we normally do not say, right? A lot of dates, a lot of numbers, a lot of stuff. Sometimes when I read verses like this, I just get distracted, even if I'm the one reading it, and halfway through my mind starts to wander, and I'm like, I hope the Eagles win today. I don't know about you guys. That's kind of where my mind goes. I'm like, okay, Elim and Sinai and Elim again and the desert of sin, and I'm starting to think about the dessert of sin that I went after church today, which is a Reese's Cup Blizzard from Dairy Queen, and man, my mind just goes all over the place in verses like this. But the point of this verse is to give us some context to what's happening. And so the important thing to see here is that it says this is the 15th day of the second month of the year. And if we look over to the book of Numbers, it tells us that the Israelites left Egypt. They were freed from slavery on the 15th day of the first month of the year. So they've been out of slavery. They've been free for 1 month. That's it. One month. Think about that when we read these next verses. We'll put this up on the screen starting in verse 2. It says, "In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, 'If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death.'" The Israelites crack me up sometimes, man. Like, they were so upset about the food that they were eating, the lack of food they were getting, that they tell Moses and Aaron they wish they were just dead in Egypt. Like, why'd you even go to the trouble of saving us, man? This is the worst. Like, that's what they were thinking. And something we were taught back when I was in seminary was that when you're reading the Bible, sometimes there's an example that you want to follow. You see somebody doing something really amazing. You're like, that's a pattern that we should model in our lives. And at other times, we read the Bible and we see people who miss the mark and show us an example that we want to avoid. And that's kind of what the Israelites were doing here. This is an example of something we want to avoid. And what we see in their actions are some attitudes that rob us of contentment, some ways of thinking that took them off the rails, and some ways that we think that take us off the rails as well. And the first attitude that robs us of contentment is wanting what we don't have. Wanting what we don't have. We'll put verse 3 back on the screen. It says, "The Israelites said to them, 'If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, there we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted.'" They said, "Man, we had it good in Egypt. Like, we were just chilling. We were sitting around eating pots of meat. We had all the food we wanted." They were so frustrated with their food, that they completely forgot what life was like in Egypt. They forgot about their forced slave labor. They forgot that Pharaoh was killing all of their children. They looked back on their time in Egypt like it was this all-inclusive vacation where they had all the food they wanted and life was perfect. And because their food was no longer the same, they let it overshadow how much better their lives were. The only thing they could think about was what they didn't have. And wanting things that we don't have, that robs us of our contentment. Because when we do that, we're saying what we have isn't enough. It is not enough to be happy. To be happy, I need something else. I need a new car. I need a new iPhone. I need newer clothes or newer toys for my kids or whatever else I'm seeing on Instagram. What we're saying is, I'll be happy if I get this thing. And look, there's no object that can bring us happiness. For the Israelites, it was their food. They just wanted an abundance of meat to eat all day long. And we all have different things that we want and enjoy. For my wife, it probably would be food. For me, it's that 8K TV on my Christmas list. But no food, no TV, no object is going to satisfy us. What's going to satisfy us is being content with what we have right now. And earlier we read Philippians 4:12, and in that Paul said, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. It doesn't matter whether we're well-fed or hungry. It doesn't matter if we have all the possessions we could ever want or if we're struggling. The hope and joy that come from following Jesus, that is enough to satisfy us in any situation. And when we're focused on that, wanting what we don't have, it won't rob us of our contentment. Look back at verse 3 with me. We'll go to the next slide. It says, the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, there we sat around pots of meat, ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. The Israelites said, you have brought us out in this desert to die. And you guys know who they were talking to? They were talking to Moses and Aaron, the people who saved them. It went to great trouble to save them. And they're saying that they were the ones that took them out of Egypt just to kill them. And they were unhappy with their situation, so they decided to blame the very men who saved them. And that's the second attitude that robs us of contentment, blaming other people. Blaming other people. How often do we have a bad day and we feel the need to blame it on somebody else? I'd be having a great day at work today if Steve didn't bring tuna fish to work again. I'd be able to enjoy my kid's soccer game if the coach actually knew anything about this sport. I'd be having a great day at the beach if my spouse didn't forget my sunscreen again. We all do that, right? We always are blaming other people for anything. And so what happens is when we do that, we end up focusing on negative things about someone else rather than being present in the moment that we're in. Instead of appreciating our situation, looking for ways that we're blessed, taking in the moment, we're not doing any of that. We're just complaining about someone. And I think when we do that, our thought is that, look, if I blame this person, then I'm going to feel better about my situation. But really what happens is we just open ourselves up to focusing on the negatives instead of being in the moment. Instead of taking the good with the bad, we're trying to find someone to blame, and that robs us of our contentment. Let's look back to verse 3 one more time. It says, the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. They said, if only we had died in Egypt, everything would be better. How crazy is that? If they died, it wouldn't be better. They'd just be dead. That's not better. That is not better than being blessed by God and being alive and rescued. The lie they believed, and the lie we tend to believe, is that if their circumstances were different, they'd be happier. And that's the third attitude that robs us of our contentment, wishing that our circumstances were different. Wishing our circumstances were different. Isn't it true that we think, man, if I could just get a different job, my life would be better? If I could just get to my retirement, or if I could just find someone to marry, then my life would be better. If I could just get my kids to move out of my house, then my life would be better and quieter. You know, we think things like that, don't we? We think that if we could just change up our situation, then all of our problems in life would go away, and we'd finally start to settle in and enjoy life. But let me tell you something. We have everything that we need right now in this moment to be content. We do. We don't need a different job. We don't need to retire. We don't need a different house or a better 401k. We've read Philippians 4:12 a few times today, but I'm going to read the first couple words of it one more time. I'll put this on the screen. It says, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. I have learned the secret of being content. Contentment is something that we learn because we learn that Jesus loves us. We learn that he has an eternity of joy and perfection awaiting us. We learn that he has a plan for our lives. And knowing those things, that's what helps us to be content. That's what allows us to be present here in this moment. And I don't know how many of you guys have ever preached a sermon or led a Bible study before, but let me take you behind the curtain a little bit. Anytime in my life that I am preparing a message about something, I can almost guarantee you that I will have multiple times leading up to that Sunday where I will be tested by whatever it is that I am speaking about. So I've known for a few weeks that I wanted to talk about contentment, and of course something was going to pop up in my life and remind me that I have a lot of room to grow in this area of my life, and that's where this past Monday night comes in. And so my wife and I, we have 2 children. One that is, our oldest kid is 2. The other's about 7 months old. And they usually sleep great, like most of the time, but not on Monday night. So Monday night, I put the kids to sleep at about 7 o'clock, right before the Eagles game started. Go Birds. And so I was able to watch the Eagles game, and the Eagles game finishes up. I go take my contacts out. I brush my teeth. I'm like laying in bed, getting ready to fall asleep. And our 7-month-old, he wakes up in his bed, and he starts crying. And not kind of like a, I'll let him sleep it out thing, but like a, I need a bottle right now scream. And so he was wide awake. He's standing up in his crib screaming. And so I went, I heated up a bottle, I took it up for him, and I changed his diaper, and I fed him, and then I'm just kind of rocking him, and I put him down in his crib. He stands right back up and starts screaming at me again. And so I pick him up again, and I'm singing to him, and I'm rubbing his back. And man, in that moment, the only thing I could think of was how ready I was for him to be old enough that he could just sleep through the night. All I was thinking about was, man, I just want to go to bed. And I want you to go to bed, little buddy. And so he wasn't. He was very angry. And so I tapped out at that point. I asked Emily to hop in. And so she hopped in. She gave it a shot for like an hour trying to settle him down. And he was still awake. So now it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And my wife and I, we wake up around 5:30 every day for work. And so I was like, wow, that's 4 hours. And there's not enough coffee to get me through a day with 4 hours of sleep. And so I go back in there, and I pick him up, I change his diaper, and I'm standing there, and I'm just holding him and rocking him. And in that moment, it hit me. I was like, this is the moment I need to embrace. This is the moment I need to appreciate. I had my son in my arms. He was hugging on me. I was rubbing his back, and I was exhausted. I needed sleep, but that was a special moment. And that's a moment that I'm going to look back on one day. I'll probably forget how tired I was when I look back on it, but I'll look back on that day because it was special. And look, we can always find negatives in our situation. We can always find a reason to be frustrated, to rationalize why life would be better if our situation was different. But if we choose to be content, if we choose to be present and satisfied with where we're at right now, then we're going to appreciate the life that we have so much more. There's so much good in every day. We just need to find it and embrace it. And one of the things that I love in life, one of the things I believe is good is music. I love music so much. I've been playing music for most of my life, and I love that we get to sing on Sundays and worship Jesus together with music. And there's a huge music festival going on this weekend down in Ocean City, the Ocean's Calling Festival. Did anybody go to that this weekend? No, it was pretty amazing. Some of my friends were sending me videos of Jimmy World and other bands that were down there. Jack Johnston is down there. John Mayer is down there. Listen, I think we live in a cool place. If I was Jack Johnston and I lived in Hawaii, I would not be flying over here. I just don't think I would do it. I don't think it's that awesome. But one of my favorite bands of all time that I've always been listening to is Newfound Glory. Love that band so much. Probably been listening to them for over 20 years. I've seen them in concert a ton of times. They're awesome. And we got a photo of their guitar player that we can put up on the screen. So this is their guitar player. His name is Chad Gilbert. He has been in the band since the beginning. And so 2 years ago, he was diagnosed with a super rare form of cancer. He was only 40 years old. And so he got that diagnosis. And the band, they recently went back out on tour. Pop punk is coming back. If you're not into it, I think it's always been around, but it's coming back. And so they went on this tour, and they're traveling along the whole U.S. And so what he would do is in between shows, he would go and he would get chemotherapy. And then he'd go back and he'd play these shows in between, but his body was like just destroyed. And so they got this huge lazy boy chair up on the stage for him, and he will get up and he will jump around and play music, and then he's struggling a little bit, and he'll sit down in the chair, and we'll kind of finish the concert out playing in the chair. And one of the really cool things that he's been doing at these concerts is he'll take some time in between songs, and he'll just kind of talk about his life and what he's been going through the last couple of years. And something he said at one of these concerts about a month ago, it really hit me, and I want to share it with you. We can put this on the screen. He said, I'm fighting cancer right now, and I tell you this because I've been stressed about my life growing up, and I wish that I could get back all the moments that I gave up thinking about how my life would turn out. I wish that I could get back all the moments that I gave up thinking about how my life would turn out. He's saying, I spent all this time stressing about my life, and None of that stress made my life better. None of that stress prevented my cancer. All it did was prevent me from enjoying the moments that I was in. Look, there's always going to be things that cause us stress, but being content is about being fulfilled and thankful even though things aren't perfect. We have a God that loves us so much. And because of his love and his forgiveness, we can be content in any situation. And I wonder how many more moments we would appreciate if we were embracing where we're at instead of always looking forward. And how many memories we would make if we were focused on being present instead of getting distracted by frustrations and stress. And how many of God's blessings we would see if we took a moment to slow down and enjoy where we're at. When we live for Jesus, we have so many reasons to be thankful, to be filled with joy, to be satisfied right now in this moment. And look, we only get to live today once. We only get to experience each moment one time. So we just have to focus on the blessings around us, let go of our distractions, and embrace where God has placed us right now. We embrace the good and the bad, and we make the most of where we're at. Let's pray. God, I thank you that you have given us promises that transcend anything we could ever experience in this life. We thank you for your unconditional love for each and every one of us. We thank you for the eternity that you promise us if we follow you. God, you love us so much every single day, and there is always something to appreciate in every single moment. No matter how challenging life is, no matter how difficult our situation is, you are blessing us in every single moment. And I pray that you'll help us to be more aware of that. I pray you help us to appreciate all the things you do for us each and every moment and each and every day. Thank you for who you are, God, and I thank you for the joy and the hope that you give each one of us. And I pray all this in your name. Amen.